Okay, so now we got our profile page created, and it's time to go ahead and position ourselves with a login page. With the login page, what we're going to do is actually explore using sessions and understanding somewhat how they work, authenticating someone through comparing the username and the password supplied with that we have in our database, and directing the person to the right page. So if somebody's not logged in and they try to go to the profile page, we need them to go to the login page. If they're logged in, we need them to go to the profile page. The way that we can do this is actually here in this example. If I go ahead and I type in profile, you'll see that it brings me to the login page. Presents our menu in 206. We set up our menu, presents our menu for login or register. We're not doing register yet, but we are doing login in this session. And so ultimately what will happen is when we put in student and rack pass and hit submit, it will redirect us to the profile page to display the information that we had set up before. The log out page will be coming next. Until then, as we're exploring and learning and you're trying to troubleshoot, I would urge you to open up your console tool, your web tools, and understand that everything that we're doing here is based on the idea that it's going to have a session. And along with a session comes a session cookie. And what this is it's a value that is used by the system to communicate back and forth with the server and the client, and include in requests and maintain information about the user that's currently logged in a temporary array on the server. So when we're playing with this, you're going to want to be able to log out. And the way that we log out at this point, if you look, if I just hit refresh, anywhere I go in the site, if I come back and I go to profile, I'm still there. I'm still logged in. And the session ID never changes because we establish a session. It's a unique session, and it's maintained. So until we create our logout page, the way that we can log out is we can actually highlight the cookie, select the cookie. We can even say clear all. And now, because there's no session established to be passed along with the request, it's going to treat it like we're not logged in. And I'll hit refresh, and it takes us to the login page. So that's where we're headed. And let's go ahead and get started. And of course, the way we start out is by taking our last, which is 206, duplicating it, our last folder, duplicating it over, calling it 207. Do an update. We'll go in, change our config to 207. We'll save that. And in the meantime, we'll go ahead and we'll put that up there as well. And let's just go out and take a peek at what we're working on here. So our local host for 207, I have my profile page, and it's reflecting 207. I made my change well, and we'll wait for it to load up to the server. Until it gets there, we'll just go ahead and start working. All right, so the first thing that we want to do, we have 3 pages that are changing in our site. And that's going to be our config, our login, and of course our login. And we're going to add a couple styles as well, just because of the form and making the form align nicely so that we can experience it, get that true user experience. So where we're going to start is with the config page, and I'm going to go ahead and, as in previous lessons, go ahead and just copy and paste that into our config page, and then we can talk about it from there. So I'll go to my code, and I'm pasting that in, and you can see I put some extensive comments in here. Honestly, they're comments that I've stolen, and they just are worded well, and so they help with it. So in this lesson, we're learning about sessions is a big part of this lesson, as you can see in the reading. And actually, we pulled a little bit of code out of some of the reading. So as you go through the reading, you'll be able to take a look at that. We previously did our connect, and we had our we actually established the session username in this lesson so that we would be able to go ahead and experience what it would be like with the user logged in. And the way that played out is if we go to, oh my, I need to open up my local host. And there we go. Need to be able to log in, and you can tell, unlike in step 206 where we would just automatically be logged in, we are not just automatically logged in. We can't get to the profile page as we set it up before. If I try to go to profile, it takes me right back to the login page. And what it happens is I am able to log in, and it establishes that session for me. I can go to the different pages. I can go back to my profile page, and I am there. What has happened when I logged in is I created a session ID, or not I created the session ID, but a session ID was created, and it's stored in a cookie, and it's passed back and forth from client to server with any transaction of data or communication between each other. So let's go in and see exactly what's happening. We know what's going on with our DB Connect. We've been there, and here we talk about session start. So session start, essentially what it does is it establishes a session between your client and the web server, and it opens up that, let's call it that bucket for information to be stored into and used throughout a session, throughout a web session, hence the word session. A couple key things to know about session start. So we're telling it to start this session, and most importantly, this tag must come before any HTML tags. Normally, we put it, we always make sure that it's in the beginning of the page. We know that our config.php is the first thing that we call, and therefore we know that we're absolutely safe by having our session established up top here. If you notice, it looks like a function. That's because it is. It's a built-in PHP function, just like other PHP functions are built-in functions. They're pre-written. They're included in the library. And what this does is this either establishes a session if one is not established, and if one is established, then it just continues that session. So at this point, that's really what caused our session down here to be created. Now at this point, for security reasons, one of the big things that we want to do is we want to make sure that somebody doesn't walk away from their computer and then come back, and when they get back, someone's able to just hop in where they left off because they're logged in. And so I set this to a 60-second period just so that we can experience it. And actually, I'm going to put it down to 10 so that you can see exactly what happens here, and then we'll come back and discuss it. So I've saved it. I'm going out, go to my profile, back, go to my login. I'm going to log in. I'm going to go to my profile page. I'm going to go to love, back to my profile. We see that it's working. So now if I just sit here for approximately 10 seconds, and I want to get over ambitious here, I'll wait 2 more seconds. And if I go to profile again, what it does is it actually kicks us out to login. So we can see actually that we have an issue with our script, and so we'll just put login like that, and we'll see how that fixes it out. log in, and we'll give this a shot again. So we're logged in. We'll go to who. We'll go back to profile. We'll wait a minute. Well, we'll wait 10 seconds. Ten seconds is a long time. And if I click on refresh, it takes me back to login. That's because it timed me out at 10 seconds. If you look in here, we set the interval to 10 seconds. For the remainder of this, I'm going to set it to 600. The idea of doing this is so that if you walk away, someone can't get in, as we discussed earlier. And this is all taken care of here. We set the inactive state to basically 10 minutes, which is 600 seconds. And what this does is this looks to see if this was set, if the session timeout was set. So in other words, the last time that you view the page, it's going to grab the time from the PHP time function, and it's going to set the session timeout to whatever time that is, which is our last time that we looked. So then the next time that we do a page refresh, it's checking to see if it's set. And if it is set, it comes in and it's going to establish session timeout, which equals the current time less the time that the variable was set, which was the last page refresh we did. And if it'll do a subtraction, and if 600 is greater than, if that time is greater than the inactive time that we set, it will do a session destroy, which is in your reading. We have two things with session unset and session destroy, and unfortunately some people get them confused and they think that if they use session underscore unset that actually kills the session, and it really does not. What it does is it just unsets all the variables inside of it. What we want to do is destroy the session so that we have to create a new session that the person has to log in again, and it sends them to the login.php page. That is setting up our config file, and that puts us in a really good place now because of the fact that we are able to log into our website, and we have some security measures, we have some time, we have the ability, we don't have the ability to log out yet, but we can go to our profile, and if I let this sit for 10 minutes, and you tried to refresh the page, absolutely you would have to go log in again. Great security precaution. One of the biggest things with forcing people to log out is it is one of the most common ways that people are able to get in. And let's say you're logged into Amazon or something, they can just start shopping on your page. Awesome. So with that, we're going to go ahead and we are going to take a look at our actual login page. So in looking at our login page and where yours is right now, we use the an example login so that we could actually see the login form work and the config go. You will be able to do that in a minute or two here once we get our login page set up, but our current login page looks like this. What I'm going to do, of course, is go and take the login page code and copy it, bring it over to our login page, and this is what your current login page looks like. This is what it will look like when you're done, and we're going to go ahead and hit save and go out and take a look real quick and make sure that this is going to work for us. We can see that we'll put that CSS. Actually, let's go ahead and let's update our CSS as well while we're doing this, and we'll get back here to the login page. I'll come down here and I'm just going to grab my CSS. I'm going to grab the whole document. What I've added I'll show you in a second, and I'm going to go to my assets, CSS, styles, .css, select all, paste. And here is exactly what we're putting in. in addition on the bottom here, and really it's just a way to pull the form wrapper in, allow a little bit of bootstrap styling to control it for the hover over the button. And let's go ahead and hit save. And that's it for the styles page, by the way. Let's go out and take another peek at our login page. Of course, we're going to have to refresh cache so that CSS comes in, and there we have it. And if you notice, whenever we refresh, our session ID is staying the same. And I just wanted to point it out because we're going to see something here in a minute. We're going to test our login, make sure that we can log in. We can log in, we're good. Go somewhere else, go back to our profile. And by the way, if you saw our ID changed when we logged in, I'll show you that again. We'll clear that out. I got rid of the session ID cookie. Go to profile. Of course, it kicks me back to login. And this time I would like you to pay attention to the session ID value, because when I log in, it's going to change. And if you see, it did change, and we did that on purpose. If we had not done it on purpose, it would have just stayed the same because it established that session. We're going to start, basically, let's take a look down here at the form. We have a form. Inside our form, we have some error handling so that we can message back if we don't get information. If we're short of, let's say, let's go ahead and do an example here. Let's say that we don't have username for some reason. We get that feedback. We don't have password for some reason. We get that feedback. We log in. Again, watch the session ID. It will change. And we're logged in. So what happened there is it took the values out of our inputs, and just like any HTML form, it captured it and we sent it off to the server in a post action. So this information was captured inside of our post, inside our page request to the server. Our submit button here, we'll get to our register. We just have that there to look pretty right now, but that will actually take us to our register page for another lesson to come. Let's go ahead and see what's happening here. When this page draws, when we load this page and we haven't submitted anything, what happens is it says, if there's a request method set to post, then execute all this inside this code block. If it doesn't, then just keep going on and draw out the page, which is exactly what it does. In the case when we hit the submit button, what happens is we post a username and we post a password. And so we bring the username in and we check for it. And if it's there, if it's not, we saw the error that it creates. And if it is there, we go ahead and populate the username variable. We check for the password. We use trim. We trim off any white space on either side, and we also check to make sure it's not empty. That is, it's not null. And if it is, we return an error. Otherwise, we leave that null as well. If the password's there, we capture it and we trim both ends, make sure there's no white space on the end, and we move on to validating the credentials. This is where, if there are errors, if both of these are empty, then we can execute the code inside this block. Like any SQL statement, what we're doing is we're building it, and we're building a string, and we're going to put the username in. And what we want to do is get the results of that username in SQL, right? So we bring it back to our results. And what we're checking for is number of rows to be equal to 1. If it's greater than or less than, we have a problem, because there should only be one user in there with that username in our database. If all is good and we have one row, we go ahead and we fetch the, just like we do in the profile page, we fetch the associative array from the results, and we do a password verify. This is built-in PHP. And what it does is it checks the password, and we pass in the password that they gave us and the password that we have in the row, and it does a validation check on the password. If that is all good, that is when we come down and we actually set up the session. So we already have a session open that was open in the config, which is fine and it's good. But there's something called session hijacking where we have to be careful. And anytime we're passing information to and from the server with a session, what we should use is the session regenerate ID. And the reason that we do this is a lot of times session hijacking happens with what we call a man-in-the-middle attack, somebody who has hopped in between our transmissions between the server and our client. Popular place for that to happen, a coffee shop or something like that. A hacker sits there and monitors the network and waits for things to come through and grabs it. And if they're able to get that session ID, there's a good chance that they might be able to hack in and falsely represent themselves as you and take over your session and grab your information. So we regenerate the ID. That happens when we log in. And then, of course, we take the session username and we set it to the username, and we redirect them to their profile page, the profile.php page. Of course, if there's the errors, this will go ahead and call out those errors. And if there's no username, of course, it will populate that with no account found. And then, of course, we always close our SQL connection. There's no sense in leaving it open. And we are able to populate our page. Hence, you can see here we are. Our page populated. I obviously took longer than 10 minutes to discuss that page. So it booted us out. And we can see our session ID ends with KR3 down here. And when I click submit, it actually reset the session ID, put me in, and at this point I should be able to browse my web pages, go back to profile, and get everywhere that I need to go. Excellent. So that wraps up step 207. Our next thing I believe we're going to do is go ahead and figure out how to log out, set up a logout page. Pretty simple lesson coming up and should be short and sweet. Until then.